Good morning, everybody. I've managed to find some time to make a commentary on Lecture 8 of the Foundations of Esotericism. Sorry that I took a couple of days break over the long weekend. Hopefully we'll be able to get back into it. Maybe by now everyone's caught up with the reading or waiting eagerly for me to give a commentary here. In this particular lecture we're talking about some aspects of understanding reincarnation. And one of them is that there's always an interface between the progress of an individual's perfection, so to say, and how through different incarnations we learn to ennoble more and more through the activity of the higher self, our astral bodies, our etheric bodies, and our physical bodies. But each time we reincarnate, of course, the cultural conditions have changed, and therefore a certain amount of catch-up needs to take place. So one of the interfaces we need to understand with reincarnation is that there is an end point. He says by the time the entropy, the sun and the earth have reconnected, we'll no longer need to go through reincarnation processes because we will have progressed to a higher sense of perfection through reincarnation. But that is also then the interface between the individuality and the cultural differences. In this way, it's been really important for us that we can't remember our last incarnations, and that there was a certain amount of work culturally, especially in Europe, where the forgetting of our previous incarnations became quite important and facilitated by especially some Christian philosophy with regards to that, and especially through some of the ritual and the use of alcohol, where our memory of previous incarnations was dulled. And therefore, every time we are reborn, we need to recapitulate. We need to recapitulate what we had learned in earlier epochs. And therefore, as a child, through education, we learn things that we had previously known. We kind of reawaken our karmic memory. And at the same time, in the progress of culture, we need to learn new things. So that is why, as a child, up to the age of 21 probably, we go through a huge amount of education and formation by our culture. One, to recapitulate what we knew from previous incarnations and previous cultural times, but also then to become aware and to incorporate the progress that has happened since the last time that we were incarnated. So that's kind of a broad stroke of that. And I'd like to make a broadened comment now on this lecture, which has to do with two comments or two threads that were going through this lecture. The one is Steiner starts to talk about a cultural epoch, and he brings them into relationship with the astrological or the time frames that the sun takes to proceed through a constellation. So in these lectures, his time frames are larger than what they are in actuality. He talks about 2,600 years, and we know more accurately that the precession of the sun through any particular astrological sign is about 2,160 years. And each of these cultural epochs, there are certain tasks that people need to incorporate into the ennoblement of their astral bodies and their etheric bodies. So at the moment, we are going through a particular cultural epoch where in the March equinox, which is the spring equinox in the north and the autumn equinox in the south, the sun rises in a particular constellation. We are now in the constellation of Pisces, and in the time of Pisces we have to learn a certain task. And what he says is that in any of these given epochs, a particular folk soul carries the focus of that learning. So at the moment, the Central European cultures carry a focus of the tasks to be learnt in this time. When we move to the age of Aquarius, that will move to another culture. But what happens in these lectures, he also then says that in any time epoch of this 2,160 years, or the time the sun takes to proceed through one of the signs, we reincarnate once in a male body and once in a female body. And again, one has to say that we have to relativize that with the gender questions, that we have our biological bodies that are XY or XX chromosomes, and that we have, in that time, we also have gender questions that are emerging on top of that, and that while we do that, he calls these two incarnations, once in a male body and once in a female body, one incarnation. So we learn something from that particular cultural epoch. So in this time, we will incarnate once in a male body in Central Europe and once in a female body in Central Europe to learn the particular tasks, and that together becomes one incarnational lesson from two different aspects. So the question really becomes, or one of the questions that has arisen, is do we only incarnate, say, about every 1,000 years? Now there's a number of factors in that really require some perspective, in that he's illustrating here in this particular lecture the two focused incarnations in a particular cultural area during a particular cultural task. However, depending on the individual, the process of reincarnation can go faster or slower depending on how quickly they are able to process the various work that they've done in their soul and in their life bodies and in their physical bodies, to let it go into a forgetting and to reincorporate it into a remembering towards and a projection into the next incarnation. And so it is possible to think that there are other incarnations that we have between those two primary incarnations that he is illustrating here. So even though we have two incarnations, or one double incarnation as a man and a woman in a particular cultural area during a particular cultural epoch, it is possible that we have other incarnations in between. In fact, it's quite possible that we have incarnations. If we've incarnated as a man, we have 2 or 3 incarnations as a man to digest those and then switch our gender to that of a woman. And as we've had our primary experiences in a woman's body, we also then would keep reincarnating in a female body to digest those. So there's not a necessity that it is only 2 incarnations in a cultural period of 2,160 years, but that there are also other incarnations where either we could go through a sequence of male bodies and a sequence of female bodies before switching over. But it is also possible to think that we alternate that more regularly and more rapidly. And I think that is also why the gender expressions that are coming about as we start to ennoble the balanced forces in the etheric force that have masculine and feminine qualities within one human being, and the astral body that also has masculine and feminine qualities, that our gender questions start to go way beyond what our biological bodies might assume that we think of each other or would assume of each other in what's known as cisgender, but that we start to broaden our gender experiences beyond those. However, even if we are incarnating in a biological male body or a biological female body, it does determine a certain amount of experience out of that as well. So that might be some insights into the epochs. Of course, the epochs he goes through, he brings that into relationship later on with the 12 signs of the zodiac. So a Platonic year is when the sun proceeds to the 12 signs about every 25,600 years. Of course, 12 times 2,160. But that we also have these 7 epochs where within each one of those there's a 7-step process of developing a particular task. And so we are at this point in a 5th step. There'll still be a 6th and 7th step for a particular period. So once we go through the age of Pisces, we'll go through the age of Aquarius, and then another epoch after that, at which point a certain amount of ennoblement will have taken place in our particular time. As time goes, I might even make a specific live stream on this aspect of the time scales and how they interrelate with each other, because it does get quite complex as we go into larger and larger and smaller cycles of time. It kind of demands its own contemplation that we live into that. But for today, let's just have a look at these 2,160 year cycles in which we have 2 major incarnations in a male body and a female body, and we learn that as a particular task within that time, but that there's the possibility of other incarnations in between those two major incarnations where we kind of in a way deepen, mature, develop aspects of the primary experience in that cultural epoch. So that might give us something to digest, and we will work on more ideas as we unfold that. I'll post lecture 9 on my Facebook page after this. Okay, wishing you well. Hope you have a good week. Cheers.